Hey there, America. Buckle up because things are about to get interesting in the world of taxes. We've got a new contender in the ring, a real heavyweight, the FAIR Act of 2025. This ain't your grandma's tax reform, folks. This act is swinging for the fences, aiming to completely abolish the IRS and get this income tax itself. Now, I know what you're thinking. Did Coco just say abolish income tax? Did I wander into a fantasy novel? Nope, this is real life, people. The FAIR Act is proposing we ditch the whole income tax shebang and replace it with something completely different, tariffs on foreign goods. Yeah, you heard that right. We're talking about taxing those fancy imported cheeses and those sleek German cars. This is a bold move, no doubt. It's like swapping out your old reliable station wagon for a shiny new sports car. It looks exciting, but will it get you where you need to go? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The FAIR Act is shaking things up, challenging the very foundation of our tax system. It's a gamble, a high-stakes game of economic poker. Will it pay off, or will we be left holding a losing hand? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure, it's going to be one heck of a ride. So, why would anyone even think about scrapping income tax? Well, the folks behind the FAIR Act argue that it's all about fairness. They say the current system puts too much burden on the backs of hardworking Americans. They claim that by shifting the tax burden to foreign companies and countries, we can level the playing field and give American businesses a competitive edge. The idea is that by slapping tariffs on imported goods, we'll make those products more expensive. This, in turn, would make American-made goods more appealing to consumers, boosting domestic production and creating jobs. It's like giving American businesses a home field advantage. Sounds good in theory, right? But of course, there's always a but. Critics argue that this approach is overly simplistic. They say that tariffs will inevitably lead to higher prices for consumers, hitting the wallets of everyday Americans. They also worry about potential retaliation from other countries, sparking trade wars that could hurt the global economy. The debate over the FAIR Act boils down to a fundamental question. Who should bear the brunt of taxation? Should it be individual citizens or foreign entities? It's a complex issue with no easy answers. Hold on to your hats, folks, because if the FAIR Act passes, we're saying goodbye to the IRS as we know it. That's right, the agency that's been the bane of our existence every April might become a relic of the past. But don't think for a second that this means the end of taxes altogether. Oh no, my friends, the government's got to get its money somehow. Enter the External Revenue Service, or ERS, the new kid on the block. This agency would be tasked with collecting revenue from a single source, tariffs. Yes, those pesky taxes on imported goods would become the lifeblood of the U.S. government. The ERS would be responsible for setting tariff rates, collecting duties, and of course, auditing businesses to make sure everyone's playing by the rules. Now, transitioning from an income-based tax system to a tariff-based one is no walk in the park. It's a massive undertaking requiring a complete overhaul of our current infrastructure. It's like swapping out the engine of a car while it's still running. The success of the ERS would depend on a multitude of factors, including its ability to efficiently collect revenue, prevent smuggling and tax evasion, and adapt to the ever-changing landscape of international trade. It's a tall order, to say the least. Now, let's get down to brass tacks and talk numbers. In 2024, the IRS raked in a whopping $5.1 trillion in gross collections. After accounting for refunds and credits, the net revenue stood at a cool $4.5 trillion. That's a whole lot of dough. On the flip side, we've got import tariffs. In 2022, the U.S. imported a staggering $3.35 trillion worth of goods, generating a relatively measly $11 billion in tariff revenue. That's right, billion with a B. It's a drop in the bucket compared to the massive haul from income taxes. So here's the million-dollar question. Can tariffs realistically replace income tax as the primary source of government revenue? The short answer is it's complicated. To make up for the lost income tax revenue, we need a significant, and I mean significant, increase in tariffs. We're talking about potentially raising tariffs by an astronomical amount. Section 5, the price of change, calculating the necessary tariff hike. Okay, let's do some quick math. To bridge the gap between the $4.5 trillion income tax revenue and the paltry $11 billion generated by tariffs in 2022, we need to increase tariffs by, wait for it, roughly 130%. Let me repeat that, a 130% increase. That's not a typo, folks. We're talking about more than doubling the tariffs on imported goods. Imagine walking into a store and seeing the price of everything skyrocket overnight. Your morning coffee, your new phone, that sweet new ride you've been eyeing, all of it would cost significantly more. Now, proponents of the FAIR Act might argue that this is a necessary evil, a short-term pain for long-term gain. They might say that the economic benefits of boosting domestic production and creating jobs will outweigh the initial price hikes, but critics are skeptical, to say the least. They argue that such a drastic increase in tariffs would be catastrophic for consumers and businesses alike. They predict a sharp rise in inflation, a decline in consumer spending, and potential job losses in industries reliant on imported goods. Section 6. Ripples in the pond. Potential economic impacts of the FAIR Act. The potential economic impacts of the FAIR Act are far-reaching and frankly a bit scary. It's like throwing a boulder into a pond and watching the ripples spread outward. Some of these ripples might be positive, but others could be downright destructive. Let's start with the bad news. Higher tariffs inevitably mean higher prices for consumers. That fancy new phone you've been saving up for, yeah, it just got a whole lot more expensive. And those imported avocados you love so much, get ready to pay a premium. This increase in the cost of living could hit low and middle income households particularly hard. On the business side, things aren't looking too rosy either. Companies that rely on imported materials or components could see their production costs skyrocket, squeezing their profit margins. They'll be faced with a tough choice: absorb the increased costs and take a hit to their bottom line, or pass those costs on to consumers in the form of higher prices. Now, for a glimmer of hope. Proponents of the FAIR Act argue that the policy could lead to a resurgence in American manufacturing. They believe that by making imported goods more expensive, consumers will be more likely to buy American-made products, boosting domestic production and creating jobs. Only time will tell what the true economic impact of the FAIR Act would be. It's a gamble, a roll of the dice that could either revitalize the American economy or send it into a tailspin. Section 7. Learning from the past. Historical precedents and their lessons. History, as they say, has a way of repeating itself. So, it's worth taking a look at past attempts to implement similar policies to get a sense of what might lie ahead. One notable example is the steel tariffs imposed by the Trump administration in 2018. The goal of those tariffs, much like the FAIR Act, was to protect American jobs and industries from foreign competition. And initially, there were some positive signs. The American steel industry saw an uptick in production and employment. However, this victory was short-lived. The tariffs also led to higher prices for consumers and businesses that relied on steel, ultimately hurting other sectors of the economy. Furthermore, other countries retaliated with their own tariffs on American goods, sparking trade wars that hurt businesses and consumers on both sides of the ocean. The lesson here is that tariffs are a double-edged sword. While they can provide a temporary boost to certain industries, they also come with a host of unintended consequences that can ripple throughout the economy. Section 8. A cloudy crystal ball. Uncertainties and challenges ahead. Even if the FAIR Act manages to navigate the treacherous waters of Congress and become law, its success is far from guaranteed. The path ahead is riddled with uncertainties and potential pitfalls. One major question mark is the likelihood of retaliation from other countries. History has shown us time and again that trade wars rarely have winners. If other countries decide to retaliate with their own tariffs on American goods, it could spark a tit-for-tat escalation that hurts everyone involved. Another uncertainty is the impact on inflation. The drastic increase in tariffs proposed by the FAIR Act could lead to a surge in prices for consumer goods, eating away at the purchasing power of American families. And then there's the monumental task of actually implementing such a radical change to our tax system, creating a new agency, the ERS, and transitioning from an income-based tax system to a tariff-based one would be a logistical nightmare. The FAIR Act is a bold experiment, a leap into the unknown. It's a gamble with high stakes and uncertain outcomes. Section 9. The final verdict. Potential implications for Americans. So, what's the final verdict on the FAIR Act? Well, as with most things in life, it's complicated. On the one hand, the act promises to eliminate income tax, a prospect that is sure to be music to the ears of many Americans. It also aims to level the playing field for American businesses and bring back manufacturing jobs to the U.S. On the other hand, the potential downsides are significant. Higher prices for consumers, retaliation from other countries, and a surge in inflation are all real possibilities that could offset any potential benefits. The FAIR Act is a gamble, a high-stakes game of economic poker. It's a bold experiment that could either usher in a new era of prosperity for the American economy or send it careening off a cliff. Only time will tell what the ultimate impact of this controversial legislation will be. But one thing's for sure, it's going to be a bumpy ride. Thank you for listening. Please give a thumbs up and subscribe.